Okay, so let's try this again. So my last recording of this failed. So if I accidentally skip something, I'm sorry, because I don't know. Anyways, this is my introduction to Blender 2.73, and this is I'm still learning how to use it, so I'm not 100% on it, but I'll definitely show you how to use the basics of it. As you can see from here, it probably does not look like the Blender that you got on default. I've changed the layout a little bit, the items in the world a little bit, and the color scheme. But it's mostly the same, especially in how it works. I'll just show you the one thing that I changed that'll make my keys different. So here's the opening screen. You'll probably see something similar. Any recent files you've had opened and all your links and stuff. To get rid of this, you just click off of it. You should see a camera and a light in your scene, which mine does not show. You can use those if you want. I just deleted them. Another thing that you'll see is this thing right here. It is the 3D cursor. You can use it to snap your vertices or something to it. So if you need to hold a position at a certain spot and then snap something to that spot, you can do that with this. It's default set to left click button, but I have it changed. File, user preferences, input. I swapped my left and my right click. That just makes it easier for me to model. Also, I'm not used to using my right click as my dominant click, and it really tired out my hand when I tried it. So I just swapped them. Another thing is you'll notice this menu over here is, you probably do not have this. This is the T menu, the T button. I just hit T while my mouse is over the viewport, and it pops up. Another menu I use is the N menu. This one is really important for my workflow. I don't know how many other people use that, but a lot of people won't use it, so it's up to you whether you have the N menu or not. So this is Blender. You have your file, render, window, help, defaults. I don't touch most of this or I haven't touched most of it so far. The main things I'm concerned about are modeling, most specifically modeling for video games. So things like animation, I'm not too familiar with. That would use this timeline down here. You're welcome to go on to other tutorials to look at that stuff. I don't know how to do it. I will say that now. Not in Blender, I should say. And it's been a while, a few years since I've done it in Max and Maya, so I would not trust my knowledge on those anyways. But over up here in the top corner, you can see all the items you have in your scene. You have your world, your cube, and if you have the camera and the light, it'll appear up here as well. To navigate in your viewport, click your middle mouse scroll wheel to rotate the scene. Click and hold, I should say. Right click once you change the file, the preferences, moves your Z, your 3D cursor. Left click grabs and moves the object. Excuse me. Blender is a little bit interesting about some of the things it does. Like, for instance, when I grab and move the object, just clicking it once will continue it, moving it. You will have to hit enter to apply the change, or, oops, wrong button. You will have to hit escape to cancel it. This is a key mechanic that you have to use for many things in the game, including modifying and a lot of things like that. You get very used to hitting escape and enter. One thing to note is Blender works best when you have a number pad available on for your keyboard. One of my previous keyboards, my number pad was broken and I couldn't use Blender very well, and it just frustrated the heck out of me. It is good to note that you can remap the keys using the file preferences, and then you go into your keys and you remap the things, but if you want to, or if you need to, I should say, or whichever. The number pad is most used for, well, it's used for rotating the screen. So in Blender you would use P, Z, F, VB, you know, things like that. In Blender you use the numpad. The period symbol, or the dot or point, whatever you want to call it, zooms in on your object, and then the 1, 3, and 7 are your different viewports, top, side, and front. Holding Control, clicking 1, 3, and 7 will get you the opposite. So it would be back, left, and bottom. If you want to rotate by a specified amount around your object, you got the 4 and 6. Just tap it repeatedly to rotate by iteration. And then on the other axis, you got 2 and 8 to rotate by iterations. The 9 key, I don't know if it does anything, and I believe the 0 key will zoom or put you in camera mode, but since I have mine deleted, I cannot show you that here. Switching between perspective and orthographic mode in Blender is done with the 5 button. Switches between orthographic and perspective. So perspective and orthographic. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, as well as 0 and the period key, all on your numpad, are quite important for navigating Blender if you use the default settings. Okay, so that taken care of. I don't know. Oh, probably other people are going to be watching this, so people who are not familiar with 3D modeling. So the difference between orthographic and perspective. Perspective, things get smaller the further back it goes. Orthographic, things do not get smaller the further back it goes. It's as simple as that. So they both have their uses. They both have their faults. A lot of people are more comfortable with certain versions. I switch back and forth personally, but generally I stick with orthographic, just because it makes modeling things a little bit easier. Okay, so now that viewports are done, you can open up a second or third or fourth viewport with these little corner tabs right here. Just click and drag and it'll create another viewport. To get rid of it, click the same one and drag in the opposite direction. You'll see it grays out with an arrow. Just let go and it goes away. Generally, you probably won't need a second viewport until you unwrap, unless you need it for, I don't know, if you're working on 2 separate objects and need to line them up or something, I don't know. Or if you're working on a scene, I should say. That one would be another one. So in the scene, we've got the grid. which marks our x-axis, our y-axis, and our z-axis. You cannot see the grid for the z. You can see x and y. Y is green, x is red. If you ever have a question about it, you got this little doohickey in the corner. It shows the different axes and which way they're pointing in axis E, whatever. You get the point. So you get that. It is pretty important to become familiar, I should say, with the different axes. Axis I. However you pronounce it. The different directions. For one, you have to move things on the different axes. For instance, I need to move this 5 to the x-axis, or move it back to center 0. I need to move this 8, and I need to bring it up by 3. The 3D environment, you have to know where your mesh is at most times. Or at the very least, which way you want to move it at most times. Rotation, X, Y, and Z rotates around the x-axis, or it rotates around the axis that you want it to rotate around. So like, if I want to rotate it around this way, I would have to use the z-axis. So let's, some of the quick keys are for rotate, Z for rotate on Z, and then you can just rotate it on Z, and it acts kind of funny sometimes. Or you can swap over to Y or the X just by hitting the keys. Escape to cancel. Scale, X, Y, Z. If you want to scale up to the side or deep, that would be the different ones. I totally mixed those up, but you get the point probably. Dimensions, the actual dimensions, how big the object is. So like if I want it to be 15 long, it's better than scaling, although I should let me rephrase that. It scales when you're not in edit mode. See how the scale for the X changed as well as the dimension for the X? This could be problematic eventually when you're working in an editor. You just have to make sure that you Control A, you apply the scale or the rotation or location movement so that it sets it back to the default 0 or 1. Okay, so that's a little bit more complex. If you're just starting out Blender and you don't need to worry about any of that stuff, don't worry about it right now. That's one of those tips and tricks that you only need to learn later, once you actually start editing things in a game engine or some alternative third-party engine. Let's see here. Over here in our T menu, transform menu, we got our basic things. Translate, which is move the object. The hotkey for that is G. You can GY, GX, GZ, or just G, just move it based off of your screen rotation. Rotate is the hotkey is R. Same things apply. And scale S, same things apply. I will say most of the things in this program I do not use, and a lot of them I don't know how to use. So you might have to go check them out on a different tutorial. Duplicate, if you want to make a second one, Shift D is the hotkey. A lot of the hotkeys I do not have memorized, just a heads up. A lot of them, if you just mouse over it, you can see it says Control J for the shortcut, or Shift D. That's how I learned most of these. You don't have to use the hotkeys if you don't want to, but a lot of people do prefer to use hotkeys. Personally, I get them mixed up and confused all the time. It's understandable. I go through like 3 or 4 different modeling programs. You forget what's what sometimes. So, I mean, that's why I always try to learn how to do it through the menus, or else I keep a cheat sheet next to me, which is what I do at work. So, that's your basic navigation of the basic modeling things you need to know. If you want to apply modifiers, a lot of people like using modifiers. That would be over here on the right in this menu. There's a wrench. This is where you apply your modifiers. They don't have as many as Max, but they do have some of them, and they're nice. But they work a little bit different. Keep that in mind. So, like, if you want to mirror something, you can't see it, but it is being mirrored. You will have to be in object mode and then apply it for it to take effect. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Okay, so let's get on to modifying our object. The mesh object is, this is called the object. It is its own, it is its own object. It's not parented to anything. It's not, it doesn't have a sub-object. It's just a cube. You can either use the transform menu to add things into the scene, or you can use this menu down here at the very bottom, the add, to add things in. Generally, I stick with meshes because for like making not animations, for making game assets, that's what you're going to be using. But if you're going to be doing other things, you've got your lines, your light sources, and other things like text. Armature, I believe, is like bones for animation. Lattice, I have no clue. Empty, I have no clue. Speaker, I'm guessing, is put an object in the scene, and then your camera if you need to render it from a specific angle or whatever. One thing to keep in mind that I do like, that I've never used though, is the grease pencil. You can literally draw on your scene. I thought that was kind of cool. It's based off of your viewport angle, of course. But, I mean, keep that in mind if you ever need to use it. So, you're starting Blender, you want to make something. How do you do it? Currently we are in object mode, which means if you have different items in the scene, you can select the different items. That way, if you need to apply different modifiers to different things, or if you need to export them separately, you can select the one you need to and then do whatever you need to do to that one object. Otherwise, you have your edit mode, which edits it, which actually edits the object. If you have a second object, add a second object in this mode, it will make it a sub-object. What this means is that, let's go with, come on. G, no. Let's try this again. So, let's move this. Oops, too far. So add a cube. I don't know why it doesn't do it on the center of the world. So we have a second cube. Notice you can edit both of them. That means that it's a sub-object. If you go back to your object mode they cannot be selected separate from each other. They are both the same thing. That is what is called a subobject. If you want to quick key for object versus edit mode is the tab key to switch modes. Delete in here is a little bit different than Max and Maya. You'll have to get used to it a little bit. I'll go over that in a bit. So rotate, I already went over, which is just hold down in the middle mouse wheel. But to pan side to side is hold down the middle mouse wheel while holding shift, and you can pan the scene. Okay, so we got that under control. So actually editing your object. Currently, by default, it is set on movement, just a move tool, which is translate in this program. So the hotkey for translate is G. Just tap G while your mouse is in the middle in the viewport, and you should be able to translate the object you're on. It translates based on your screen rotation unless you constrain it to X, Y, or Z. So translate just moves your thing around. You can click and drag this little circle here to move it based off of your screen orientation. I like to use that with the front, side, and top viewports. That way I can just easily move it if I need to based off of X, Y, and Z axis. And then or else you could individually click on and move the arrows. Rotate. You can just select a face or a line or a bunch of different lines or faces, and then you can just rotate it. The hotkey is R, and again it rotates based off of your screen or X, Y, and Z. Let's move this back. That's bugging me. Okay. Scale uses the same setup. The hotkey is S for scale, and then X, Y, and Z. Come on. Oh, I can't do it that way. If I did it this way, I could do it that way. There we go. And then when you hit the change you want, you hit enter to apply it to the mesh. So that's your basic move, rotate, scale. You have your different selection modes. You have your vertice mode, which means you can select these little vertices, which are the corners, or the lines intersect. You can select your lines, which are pretty much the skeleton of the object, which define the outline of it. And then you got your faces, which are the filler between all the lines that create the solid walls of the object. So faces, lines, or edges. Faces, edges, and vertices. Those are your three methods of modification. This button right next to it that's highlighted, that makes it so you can either So if you unhighlight it, you can select vertices that are behind what you're currently looking at. You can make it see-through so you can select them. Otherwise, you cannot select that vertice from the front. So, now that we got basic movement, rotation, and scale covered, let's move over here to the transform menu. You can see it's changed. You still got your translate, rotate, and scale, no problem. But it's got a whole bunch of other things. These are all just tools to manipulate your mesh. Different things do different things. Most of them I do not use. The main ones I use are, well, you can't see a lot of them actually. There's more than what's shown on here. But the most of the ones I use are extrude, make face, subdivide, loop, cut and slide, and knife. Those are my main ones. I'll go over those tools because they're the most useful. Extrude. So I have a face here and I want to extrude it. Just hit E for the hotkey, or you can hit the extrude button. Individual face, vertex normal, region. They got a few extra things, but if you just want basic extrude, just the E button. One thing that's different about Blender and the other main programs. Extruding, you can extrude a side that is connected or is surrounded by faces on all sides. So you can make the side extrude like that, or the edge extrude like that. It does not have to be against an empty edge. What is the term? Anyways, you get the point, right? So keep that in mind. It's both useful and a pain in the butt. So we'll go over make face later. Subdivide, simple enough. You select what you want to be subdivided and you hit subdivide and it divides it. I don't think I can get more simple than that. So here's something I didn't cover earlier. Selecting multiple faces. Hold shift if you want to select faces that if you just want to select faces and you don't want them to link together. For example, shift, oops, wrong button. Shift click gets me faces without them linking together. What it means by linking together is if you hold control and click. So I have one selected, I hold control, I click here. You can see it tries to link it together. Usually it goes through loops, edge loops to do that. It does not always recognize edge loops. It will try to use the most direct method possible, so you have to be careful with that. It would be nice if it recognized edge loops, but it doesn't. So control, if you want to select things in a line, or shift if you want to select them individually. You'll notice you cannot click and drag a selection tool. You have to actually hit the B button and then you can click and drag to use your selection tool. Or else, if you want to use the lasso tool, you have to hold control, and if your settings have been swapped, your clicks have been swapped, then you click, right click and drag to do your lasso tool. If you haven't swapped your settings, then it would be left click and drag. And then A selects everything L selects element. You have to be careful with this one. Let me toss in another cube. So if I have that already selected and I hit L over a different object, it'll select them both, or sub-objects. So you have to make sure that you only have either nothing selected when you hit L, or you have a face on the object selected when you hit L. Otherwise, you'll get this. You gotta be careful with that. But you can select multiple objects just by hitting L with your mouse over it. So that's selection for you, nice and simple. So back to this. So loop, cut, and slide. This one's nice. You just it goes by edge loops and it just makes a thing, and then you can, once you click, you can adjust where it sits on the between the vertices, and then you click again and it's done. Or else you can loop, cut, and slide and then set it and hit enter or escape, and it stays in the middle. Another thing you can do is you can use your mouse wheel to up the iterations of how many loops you want to toss in, and then slide those. You can also adjust them over here. That's if you want to get that high in depth into it. Knife. The knife tool is pretty much the cut tool, if you're familiar with Max. You have to hit enter to apply it, and you can see I have made a cut. You have to be very careful though. In Blender, the make face edge tool, it is both a blessing and a curse. You can make a edge like connect, but if you look closely you can see it is still just one polygon. It just makes an edge over it that does not split the polygon. You have to be very careful about that. The deleting also is a little bit strange in this. You gotta get used to it a bit. Dissolve dissolves edges that are attached to a polygon, to a face. Versus delete will just delete the edge, including any faces it's touching. Well, not any, but you get the point, I think. The face it's on, currently part of. But the make edge face tool is pretty useful. So like if I have two edges selected and I click the tool, it'll make a face. It also works on the diagonal for making a half a triangle. But it does not work like Max does with the bridge tool. It does not work like that, unfortunately. If you want to bridge, it'll connect, but it doesn't put in the subdivision in the middle. You would have to add that manually. The workaround for this I found is press the space bar, type in grid fill, grid IDFIL, grid fill. Grid fill works for that. So as you can see, it's starting to get more complicated as we go through things. But those are the main things that you would use. You got your knife for cutting, and you've got your loop, cut, and slide for edge loops. You've got your subdivide for subdividing faces or edges. And then you've got your extrude to extrude your faces, edges, and I think vertices, but I'm not too certain on that one. Let's try it. Yeah, it just makes a free hanging edge, which is an interesting thing about Blender. You can have free hanging edges that don't have any faces attached to it. You got to be careful with those, because you can not notice them very easily. One thing I do like about Blender is if you have, let's say we have duplicate. I have two faces right here right now, as you can see. Right down here, remove doubles. Oh, hold on. You duplicate it, and then if you weld the vertices on top of each other, on accident, and then you go remove doubles, you can see it just got rid of it. It's now only one face. Remove doubles is useful, especially if you accidentally duplicate something and then not move it. I've done that a lot. You can make literally faces on top of faces on top of faces and you won't notice it. But if you remove doubles, so long as they're welded, it'll get rid of them. Oops. Okay. One thing good about these hanging edges is you can use it to make faces. So it can be useful. You just got to keep them in mind that it does happen like that, and don't do it on accident. One thing with the deleting, if you delete only faces, you'll see you actually have, if you can see it, hanging edges in there. I don't know if they have a actual technical term, that's just what I call them. But they're edges without faces. You got to watch out for how you delete things in this program. Otherwise, you'll do weird things like this. Dissolve edges is generally a good thing to do when you're dissolving edges. So watch out for the hanging edges, because they can stay there and be a pain. But I mean, once you get used to them, it's easy enough to deal with. No problem. And they're actually quite useful if you know how to use them. So spacebar is kind of like a search everything type of thing. So mirror, fill, loop, like all kinds of things. If you just want to use a quick find instead of searching for it because you forgot the key for it or whatever, spacebar is your friend. There are hidden menus like the W key. I don't really know if it's a hidden menu. It just seems like that to me. So you got specials here. There are other menus out there as well. I don't use them, so I don't have their keys memorized. Like I think X. Yeah, X is the delete. Z, not Z. Let's see here. Q? No, there was other menus too, but you get the point. Shift Z? Nope. Control Z? No, that's just undo. Anyways. Alt, no? Really, if you want to get into all that, you'll have to look it up somewhere else. I really don't know them all, obviously. But that is basic modeling. From here, I will end this. If you want to see, like, unwrapping, open a second, and you have your unwrap here. In this one, select your edges that you want to Control E, mark seam, U, unwrap, A, I should say, and then U, and you got it already unwrapped. Why is... oh, I see. Like, you got your edge right there. So, clear seam, Control E, clear seam, and then U to unwrap, and it puts back in. Or else you can select your element, if you just want to unwrap this one and not touch that one, you select your element and unwrap. If you have a sub object, I should say. And that's the basics for unwrapping. Your modifications are in here. If oops. If I have time in the future, I'll go over it in more in depth. If anybody's interested, I should say. Well, that's the basics for modeling in Blender. File export is your best friend. OBJ or FBX, you'll have to get a FBX plugin, I believe. But OBJ is for things like Blender, FBX is for Unreal. And that's pretty much it. Well, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you some other time, I guess. Bye.